Okay, so good day, everyone. And we will be discussing about Articles 114 to Articles 117 of the revised Penal Code. Now, these articles are related to our topic with regard to treason and espionage. So, these are considered as crimes against national security. Now, when we speak of Article 114 or treason, treason is considered as the breach of allegiance by a Filipino or a resident alien, by levying a war against the Philippine government or by helping its enemies during wartime. It's very important for us to note who may commit this felony. First is a Filipino citizen, which has a permanent allegiance. Second, a resident alien, which has a temporary allegiance. And take note that foreigners who are not residents cannot commit treason. So, what are the elements of treason under the revised penal code? First, the offender owes allegiance to the Philippine government. Second, there is a war in which the Philippines is involved. And take note that the third element is the offender must levy war or assembles men and fight against the government or adheres to the enemy through giving them aid or comfort, whether providing them weapons, shelter, information, and supplies. And lastly, is the act must be proven by two witnesses to the same overt act or confession in open court. So, what is the penalty of committing a treason? Under the revised penal code, the imposable penalty is reclusion perpetua to death, plus a fine of not less than 100,000 pesos. It is important to note the following. First, treason cannot be committed in times of peace, which means that we go back to its basic element that treason can only be committed during wartime. Secondly, it is considered as a continuing crime, which can be prosecuted even after war. And thirdly, not treasonous act are those performing ministerial duties under enemy occupation unless policy making or harmful to Filipinos. So that makes a ministerial function or occupation a treasonous one. So, to illustrate further a treason, we have several illustrations here. First illustration is a Filipino soldier joins the invading army and fights against Philippine troops. Second, a Filipino citizen supplies food and medicine to enemy soldiers during war. And thirdly, a resident alien, a foreigner living in the Philippines, gives secret maps of Philippine defenses to the enemy. So that's treason under Article 114 of the revised Penal Code. Now, let us proceed to Article 115, which is the conspiracy and proposal to commit treason. We have to remember that this particular felony punishes planning or even just suggesting the commission of treason. So, who may commit Filipinos and resident aliens since treason requires allegiance? Secondly, is let us define or enumerate what are the elements of conspiracy. So, the following are the elements of conspiracy. One, it is committed in time of war. Second, two or more persons agree to commit treason. And thirdly, they decide to commit it. So, how about the elements of proposal? First, it is also committed in time of war. Second, one person decides to commit the treason, and thirdly, he or she proposes it to another. The penalty of such, when we speak of conspiracy, is prisión mayor, which is 6 years and 1 day to 12 years, and a fine of not less than 10,000 pesos. How about for the proposal? A prisión correctional, which is 6 months and 1 day to 6 years, and a fine of not less than 5,000 pesos. So let us try to make illustrations on conspiracy and proposal. First, let's proceed with conspiracy. Two Filipinos agrees to work with foreign enemy by cutting Philippine supply lines during wartime. And a group meets secretly and decides to give weapons to the enemy army. For the proposal illustration, a man tells his friend, "Let's help the enemy attack the military camp." Another illustration is a citizen whispers to a neighbor, "We should hand over our mayor to the enemy forces." These simple acts are punishable under the revised penal code, falling under Article 115 or the commission of conspiracy and proposal. Now let us proceed to Article 116, which is a misprision of treason. When a Filipino knows of a conspiracy to commit treason but fails to report it immediately to authorities, it is considered as misprision of treason. Who may commit this particular felony? Only Filipinos may commit to this. Take note that foreigners cannot commit this crime. Elements of misprision of treason are the following. First, the offender is a Filipino owing allegiance to the government. Second, he or she has knowledge of a conspiracy to commit treason. Third, he or she conceals it or fails to report immediately to the governor, mayor, or fiscal. So, what is the penalty if one commits misprision of treason? Prisión correctional, which is 6 months and 1 day, and to 6 years, up to 6 years, as an accessory of treason. We have to take note that this particular crime applies only before treason is committed. It is a crime of omission, which means there is a failure to act. And lastly, immediately, which means that within a reasonable time, depending on circumstances. So, what are the examples or illustrations of misprision of treason? Example: a Filipino overhears two neighbors plotting to guide enemy soldiers through a secret mountain trail, but he keeps silent. Second, a barangay resident learns that a relative is preparing to send military blueprints to the enemy, but he doesn't tell the authorities. Let us now proceed to our last topic for this video, which is the espionage under Article 117 of the revised Penal Code. Espionage means spying or disclosing confidential defense information, whether in wartime or peacetime. So who may commit this particular felony? Anyone, whether Filipino, foreigners, residents, and non-residents. There are two modes which apply this particular crime specifically to a public officer. The first mode is unauthorized entry, which means that the offender enters a warship, fort, or military reservation. He or she has no authority in the said entrance, and the purpose is to obtain confidential defense or information. The second mode is of disclosure by a public officer, which means that the offender is a public officer. He or she has access to defense data by reason of office, and he or she discloses this information to a foreign nation. So the penalty for this is prison correctional, 6 months and 1 day to 6 years, and the next higher penalty up to prisión mayor or reclusion temporal if the offender is a public servant. We have to take note that in this particular felony, citizenship is irrelevant. Even foreigners can commit espionage. And take note that this can be committed even in peacetime if info relates to defense. And what is the example of this? Sending of Philippine naval maps to a foreign country is considered as an espionage. Now, the mode one here is an authorized entry example. A civilian sneaks into Philippine naval base and takes picture of submarines, and a foreign climbs the fence of a military camp to copy defense documents. The mode two is a disclosure by a public officer. The illustration here is a government officer leaks a confidential radar system's details to a foreign embassy, and a Navy clerk photocopies classified documents about Philippine warships and sells them to another country. Thank you for your time, and those are our discussions for this video. Treason up to espionage. Thank you so much for your time.